Bonjour à tous.
Hello everyone. This type of helicopter is something you see flying over your heads every day. It is the Airbus helicopters Écureuil B3, built by the French manufacturer Airbus Helicopters. It replaced the llama, which you may remember seeing, particularly during crop spraying operations, a few years ago. Climbing above 4,000 meters in the Alps is already a daily challenge for helicopter pilots. So just imagine landing on Mount Everest at almost 9,000 meters. More than 20 years ago, test pilot Didier DELSALLE landed a B3 on the roof of the world twice. Last September, he was at Sion with the very helicopter that set the record. The Makila team was, of course, there too. I won't say any more, over to the picture.
Je ne vous en dis pas plus, place aux images.
On the 14th of May 2005, Didier DELSALLE landed an Écureuil B3 on the summit of Mount Everest. No one will ever break this record. A record born from the pilot's daring bet and the determination of his engineers, demonstrating the capabilities of the French aeronautical industry, particularly the manufacturer Eurocopter, which later became Airbus helicopters.
20 years later, it is now September 2025. Didier DELSALLE is in Sion with the record-setting helicopter, which has traveled from Chamonix. The two are reunited. Despite the years that have passed, Didier DELSALLE still feels great affection for the machine that went where no one had ever gone before.
Ça fait toujours beaucoup d'émotions.
It still brings a great deal of emotion. A great deal of emotion. It's really like meeting up again with an old friend you always trusted completely, with whom you shared adventures. That's exactly it, a true companion.
It all began in the 1980s. DELSALLE was a helicopter pilot in the French Air Force. For more than a decade, he flew Alouette 2s, Alouette 3s, Écureuils and Pumas. His military missions accumulated, but he always aimed higher. He applied to become a test pilot. He was accepted and passed his examinations.
J'ai travaillé 5 ans au sein du centre d'essai en vol en France.
I worked for 5 years at the French Flight Test Center for the government. Then one day in 1997, the manufacturer Eurocopter, now Airbus Helicopters, came looking for me.
Airbus Hélicoptère comme pilote d'essai en 1997.
For mountain flying until the mid-2000s, there was one undisputed king, the llama. Developed in the late 1960s, it became the backbone of many alpine operators. On the 21st of June, 1972, test pilot Jean Belay flew a llama to the phenomenal altitude of 12,440 meters. The llama became a legendary aircraft for high-altitude rescue and transport operations. However, production stopped in the early 1980s. Relatively slow and fuel-hungry, the llama nevertheless found no real successor until the late 1990s.
In 1997, Eurocopter unveiled the Écureuil B3. It was essentially a steroid-enhanced version of the Écureuil, which had already existed since 1974. The B3 promised better cruising speed and improved payload capabilities. But this new machine created a dilemma for the French manufacturer.
Ça n'a pas été facile, en fait, de se faire de la concurrence quasiment en interne.
It wasn't easy competing almost internally. The Llama came from Aerospatial, the company that later became Eurocopter and then Airbus Helicopters. So it was rather difficult. I was dealing with operators who were extremely specialized in mountain flying, and it was not an easy mission at all.
Dans le vol en montagne, et ça n'a pas été une mission facile du tout.
At first, the B3 left future operators skeptical. They criticized, among other things, its reduced visibility and the fact that it seemed less stable than the Llama in strong winds.
Il fallait pas mal de diplomatie, expliquer aux...
It took quite a lot of diplomacy to explain to operators that yes, the aircraft concept was somewhat different. But the modern technology introduced with the B3 would compensate for all that. The B3's control authority meant that in crosswinds it was just as comfortable and stable as the Llama. In terms of visibility, yes, there was slightly less, but we later improved that by adding glazed surfaces.
On a amélioré ça un petit peu par la suite en mettant des surfaces vitrées.
We began to see some possibilities. It was certified up to 7,000 meters, but we could sense it was capable of going much higher. So my engineer and I started thinking about what we might achieve with this aircraft, and that was the beginning of the story to come. First of all, I've always liked George Mallory's quote. George Mallory and Irvine disappeared while climbing Everest during their third attempt, I believe in 1924. A journalist asked him why he wanted to go there. His answer was, because it's there. For us it was much the same. Why Everest? Because it existed, so it became the ultimate objective.
Why Everest? Not merely for the beauty of the feat at the time, Eurocopter was locked in fierce competition, particularly against the Bell 407 from the American manufacturer Bell. The aim was therefore to demonstrate the B-3's absolute superiority, especially in the field of very high-altitude rescue operations in the Himalayas. The idea gradually took shape, sometimes in an explosive atmosphere.
Avec mon ingénieur, on fait quelques vols pas forcément autorisés, on se fait bien tirer les oreilles par notre...
My engineer and I carried out a few flights that were not necessarily authorized, and we got quite a severe telling off from management. Because, well, we were operating in an area that frankly wasn't approved.
On se dit, on peut le faire en théorie, mais j'ai pas de marge.
After checking the calculations ourselves, we knew we could theoretically do it, but I had no margin for error.
Et là, on s'aperçoit qu'on se crée un certain nombre de marges. Ça s'est terminé entre quatre yeux.
One day it ended in a face-to-face meeting. The CEO called me in and closed the door. The conversation went more or less like the little cartoon you can read there. Right, you're driving me mad, I'm going to let you go ahead. But if you crash, you're on your own. If you succeed, it's me, it's the company. Fair enough, I accepted the deal, with one condition, no publicity, no sponsorship, which meant operating on a very limited budget.
C'est aucune publicité, aucun sponsor, donc avec un financement extrêmement faible.
Funding for the operation was secured and the logistics arranged. On the 11th of May, 2005, Didier DELSALLE and a team of 10 people arrived in Lukla, Nepal, with a standard production helicopter. Lukla is one of the most dangerous airports in the world. It serves as the gateway to Everest for local operators. The team got into position, but finding jet fuel for the helicopter proved almost mission impossible. Fortunately, an original solution was found.
What could we do? I went back to Kathmandu and bought 1,500 liters of fuel in 20-liter cans. It was actually quite amusing. I sent my mechanics into the Kathmandu markets to buy the cans. I loaded everything up, and I had to charter a Mi-17 to transport it all up to Lukla.
Reaching Everest by helicopter also required a great deal of negotiation. Fortunately, Didier DELSALLE had prepared thoroughly.
J'essayais d'envisager un petit peu tous les problèmes diplomatiques. Bon, ça s'est bien passé.
I tried to anticipate all the diplomatic issues. Preparation went well enough. During the missions themselves, things became more complicated and I had to renegotiate virtually every flight each day. I also considered the religious aspect, by asking Buddhist monks whether it would be sacrilegious to land a helicopter on a summit. Every mountain in the Himalayas, every peak, bears the name of a goddess or a god, so I took that religious dimension into account as well.
Là-bas, donc j'ai aussi pris en compte ce fait religieux.
The police wanted to control the overflown areas and insisted on accompanying Didier on every flight. But the B3 flight manual limited the aircraft to 7,000 meters. Only a test pilot was authorized to exceed that altitude. Combined with the danger posed by oxygen deprivation, a compromise was reached. The inspector would depart on every flight with one of us, but they would be dropped off 1,000 meters higher at Tangboche, within sight of Everest, where they would wait for the return flight. The B3 climbed with astonishing ease.
The first truly significant test was the landing on the South Colonel. The South Col is the pass between Mount Everest and Lhotse. Its altitude is around 7,950 meters depending on the location. That was the first real adrenaline rush.
Et voilà, ça a été, je dirais, la première montée d'adrénaline.
La puissance que vous pouvez demander à votre moteur diminue.
The power available from your engine decreases with air density. The higher you climb, the less power you have. On Everest, for example, an aircraft weighing 1,250 kilograms at low altitude effectively behaves as though its mass has nearly doubled.
Vous avez un appareil dont la masse est quasiment multipliée par 2. Le moteur, lui, a perdu quasiment la moitié.
The engine has lost almost half its power. So the whole challenge was to manage what appears to be a much heavier aircraft with far less power, and all this in incredibly strong updrafts and downdrafts.
Extrêmement fort à la descente comme à la montée.
Donc il a fallu composer un petit peu entre le vent, les
I had to work with both the wind and the turbulence. Once I entered the South Parcel, I realized turning around in flight was almost impossible.
Allez, pour aujourd'hui ça ira, et pour le reste, on attendra que ça baisse un peu. Hein.
Ouais.
Mais tu vois les...
I couldn't determine where the wind was coming from because everything was swirling around inside the pass.
Everything had to be ready for D-Day. The technicians prepared the cameras that would film the Everest landing. The record-setting B3 remained entirely standard apart from a few minor modifications.
Dans mon idée, il fallait vraiment montrer aux opérateurs qui utilisent le...
In my mind, it was essential to show operators using the B3 the safety margins available with their everyday aircraft compared with the one I flew to Everest. It was a completely standard machine that I rented from a customer.
Les seules modifications qui ont été faites sur
The only modifications involved reducing weight by removing a number of vibration dampers that were unnecessary for climb and descent performance.
Friday the 13th of May brought dreadful weather, caused by an unpredictable monsoon. Eventually conditions improved, and it was time for the final preparations before the record attempt.
So, Didier, 74.8, 78.5, with the helmet.
Saturday the 14th was the big day. The whole team was busy. Tension was rising.
The turbine coped effortlessly with the effects of altitude. Didier DELSALLE and his team had already tested it for some time in the harshest possible conditions.
L'Ariel est vraiment une turbine en laquelle on a
The Ariel is truly a turbine we had complete confidence in. Before heading into the mountains, I studied its behavior at very high altitude, at the altitudes where airliners fly.
Donc, on a été extrêmement surpris par la réponse.
We were extremely surprised by the turbine's remarkably positive response, both in pure power and during power variations such as those encountered in mountain turbulence.
En volant la montagne due aux turbulences.
At very high altitude, violent updrafts and downdrafts are common. Despite all his experience, Didier DELSALLE had to battle the unleashed elements.
Le souci, c'était je montais tellement fort.
The problem was that I was climbing so strongly that I couldn't actually get close to the summit. I had to find a rather complicated path between these powerful updrafts and the strong downdrafts that kept forcing me down despite all the helicopter's power. The real difficulty was finding the correct route.
Avant le poser, on n'a pas beaucoup de sensations en fait.
Before the landing, you don't feel much. You're too focused, too attentive to the machine. I think the emotions only come afterwards, once you leave.
Quand on s'en va.
Bon, allez, on va regarder le temps.
There are skid marks, at least one skid.
Alors, mais...
T'as réussi à...
Attends, on ne dit rien tant qu'on n'a pas regardé la bande.
On dit rien, il faut tirer
2 minutes. Hein.
The achievement was not technically a landing record as many believed, but a takeoff record. According to FAI regulations, the record required an initial landing followed by remaining stationary for 2 minutes.
Ça fait combien? Allez,
Posé sur le...
Returning to base. Celebrations with the team, everyone absolutely delighted. I've never seen this before, it's the first time it's done that to me. Right, transfer flight 2. What time did I tell you? I can't remember. 57. Bloody hell.
A flight data recording problem forced Didier DELSALLE to return the following day for another landing on the roof of the world.
On a la vidéo.
L'approche a été à peu près...
The approach was fairly similar, but far more turbulent. I needed 4 attempts before getting back onto Everest because the wind was much stronger, much more unstable and, I think, far more turbulent. It was considerably more intense, and I kept thinking, this can't be possible.
Ça a été nettement plus sportif, et je me disais, mais c'est pas possible. Il faut tenir encore...
Holding those 2 minutes was a real battle.
Une belle bagarre.
Sagarmatha allowed me to stay for 4 minutes, and I thanked her at length. I made 2 circuits above before heading back.
Avant de rentrer.
Le souvenir, c'était ce travail en équipe que l'on a dû effectuer avant la mission.
What I remember most was the teamwork required before the mission to prepare the aircraft, and during the mission itself, when we faced difficult operating conditions. We had nothing on site, no maintenance center to inspect the aircraft. Everything was done outdoors. Everyone had a role, whether pilot, mechanic or electrician, everyone contributed. We had to refuel the aircraft each time using small 20-liter cans, so everyone pumped fuel or held the hose. Mechanical work, camera adjustments, every speciality was involved. That teamwork left a profound impression on me.
Sur les caméras, toutes spécialités confondues, ça a vraiment été ce travail en équipe qui m'a beaucoup marqué.
And if it had to be done again today, would Didier DELSALLE once again choose an Écureuil B3, or perhaps borrow a cheetah, the Indian version of the llama?
Ah non, le B3.
Oh no, the B3. The cheetah is an older design. Its engine may have power levels similar to the Ariel, but its behavior at altitude is completely different. In turbulent conditions I would run every risk of damaging the llama's engine, whereas with the Ariel I have complete confidence, even in extremely difficult conditions. Its flexibility means I would go back there again with total confidence.
D'utilisation fait que j'y retourne vraiment en toute confiance.
In 20 years, many things have changed. Today, not a single llama remains in operation in Switzerland. The B3 has definitively established itself as its successor. What further developments could still be imagined for this aircraft?
On a eu depuis une nouvelle version de l'Écureuil avec encore plus de kilowatts.
Since then we've had a new version of the Écureuil with even more kilowatts and even greater takeoff power. The Écureuil is already almost an optimal machine. There's not much left to remove or improve. Any further additions would probably not benefit operators who want an extremely simple aircraft with a high payload.
Favorable pour les opérateurs qui veulent garder une machine extrêmement simple avec une charge utile élevée.
So ultimately, Mr. DELSALLE, if you could imagine your dream helicopter, what would it be?
Pour faire du vol ou du travail.
For mountain flying and aerial work, you need an extremely simple machine. I must admit I would choose a magnificent modern B3, perhaps lighten it slightly. You don't need a great deal of avionics to climb that high. For me, the B3 remains the aircraft to which I will stay loyal all my life. Three-quarters of my professional life have been spent with helicopters. I can only thank those who designed these aircraft, on which I worked and to which I tried to contribute my own small improvements. I was fortunate enough to live extraordinary adventures with helicopters, and for that I am deeply grateful.
General Eisenhower once said that this aircraft had helped win the war, alongside the Jeep, the atomic bomb and the bazooka. This, of course, is the Douglas DC-3. Initially restricted to military missions, it gradually established itself as the all-purpose aircraft of commercial aviation. Nearly 11,000 DC-3s were built worldwide. A few years ago, the Super Constellation Association purchased one of the last 150 airworthy DC-3s. It offered aviation enthusiasts the opportunity to take flights on board. In 2011, the Makila camera team was lucky enough to accompany this DC-3 on an alpine flight from St. Stephen Airport. Over to the pictures.
Place aux images.
Stop départ. Ok. Ok. 20, 25, 30, 35, 40.
This DC-3 was sold to Turkey some time ago, due to increasingly stringent regulations governing large historic aircraft. As for us, we'll see you next time. And, as always, our usual reminder to stay safe if you're a pilot. See you soon.